So I'm constantly trying to become a more empathetic human to my fellow humans, but it's tough when you live in the city and everyone's calling each other asshole. And I'm guilty too. Like I nearly didn't get here on time today. I'm taking the subway to Grand Central to catch the train here, and I'm late. And if you live in the city and you take the subway, you know when you're waiting to get on the subway to please step aside and let the others off first before boarding. So I'm like, every second counts, and I'm at the doors, and the people waiting did not step aside and let the others off before board. And so my gut is to say, fucking asshole. But I'm not here tonight to talk about people assholes, though. I'm here to talk about animal assholes. Snakes. Assholes of the animal kingdom. Yeah, these guys. Fucking slithering around on their bellies like some kind of snake. The level of anxiety these guys cause for every other animal is ridiculous. If you're a Christian, you know that everything shitty in our lives is because of a snake. Famines, droughts, mayonnaise. The list goes on. Snakes are assholes. At least that's how I was brought up. It's in my family. My grandmother, my father, my brother, we're all terrified of snakes. So when my buddy Adam showed up at my apartment in college to ask me and my roommates if we'd take his pet and keep him in our apartment for a while, of course it had to be a snake. So Adam's standing in the doorway with this glass terrarium. It's got a layer of sand, a stick, a heat lamp, and a fucking boa constrictor. And he's like, you guys got to do me a solid, man. My landlord won't let me keep a snake in the apartment. And we're like, yeah, because that's fucking insane. And he's like, please, just keep him here for a while. And I'm thinking, no way. But my roommate, Jason, happens to be a biology major with an emphasis in zoology. And he's like, you know what, that'd be kind of cool to have a boa constrictor here I could study. And my roommate, Fred, happened to be a mechanical engineering major. And he said, actually, I'd be into studying its unique form of rectolateral locomotion or something like that. And my roommate, Patrick, is a philosophy major, and he says, why the fuck do we want a snake in the apartment? So Patrick and I, we're on the same page. We're like, no way. But Jason and Fred's name's on the lease. So that's that, and we have a new roommate. And Adam says, you guys know me, I'm not good at naming things, you can name them. So we named him Doug. We thought we were being witty. That's before I lived in Brooklyn and found out everyone has a cat named Todd or Steven. So Doug lived in his terrarium, and Patrick stayed far, far away from Doug, but Jason and Fred were able to encourage me to get to, try to hold Doug and play with him, and Doug was actually pretty friendly. He'd wrap around my arm and give me a gentle hug. I think it was a hug, I don't know. And I was starting to get used to it, and he loved being out of the terrarium. He hated the terrarium. The terrarium for him was jail, and he was in solitary confinement. He just had the stick and the heat lamp. He hated it, and we were out all day, so he'd be home alone, and of course we'd come back and we'd take him out and play with him, but that apparently wasn't enough, because one day we come home and we see an empty terrarium. So we're like, fuck. So we start looking all over the apartment, and we're looking under the furniture, and we pull the cushions off the couch, and we're all digging through our respective piles of laundry and turning the place upside down, and there's no Doug anywhere. And then Jason, who you may remember, is a major in biology with an emphasis on zoology, says, snakes need heat, and he's away from his heat lamp, so he's probably sought out the nearest heat source. And Jason runs over to the radiator, and sure enough, on the back of the bottom of the radiator, Doug is wrapped around that thing, like squeezing it for every bit of warmth he can get. And so we uncoiled Doug, and we put him back in jail. And this time we had a piece of cardboard on top of the terrarium. In hindsight, we were in college. It seemed, but this time we made sure that it covered each corner. There were no holes. There's no way Doug was going to escape again. So the second time we came home to an empty terrarium, first thing we do, we go to the radiator, and Doug's not there. So we look under the furniture, we take the cushions off the couch, we start digging through our laundry, turn the place upside down. No Doug anywhere. What else? Where else could he find heat? And then Fred, you may remember, is a mechanical engineering major, and Fred says, you know what? Refrigerators compress refrigerants into a vapor, forcing it through the coils on the back of a refrigerator, thereby causing an exchange of heat and yada, yada, yada. And so the next thing, we're pulling this refrigerator out from its nook, and sure enough, Doug is wrapped around these hot coils on the back of it. Uncoiled Doug, put him back in solitary. This time, the cardboard's definitely covering each corner, and we stack books on each corner, which takes some balancing. So there's no way he can push it up. There's no chance he can get out. So the third time we come home to an empty terrarium. So we go to the radiator, there's no Doug. We pull out the refrigerator, there's no Doug. We look under the furniture, we pull out the cushions, we go through the laundry, we turn the place upside down, there's no Doug anywhere. And we're like, shit, what other source of heat is there? And then we look over and we see the sun streaming through the open window, warming the windowsill. And so we walk over there, and we're 3 flights up, and there's no ledge outside. There's nowhere he could crawl and hang out on. And we don't see him there. And then you may remember that my roommate Patrick is a philosophy major. And Patrick says, maybe when he got to the windowsill, he stopped to think. And contemplating the futility of a pointless existence in a meaningless world, he decided to jump. So we ran downstairs, and we're raking our fingers through the bushes and the shrubs and the leaves, and we can't find Doug. And we didn't find him that day, and we didn't find him the next day. And a few more days go by, a week goes by, a couple weeks go by, and we finally resign ourselves to well, Doug is gone. Maybe he finally found a friend and he's not lonely anymore. That's all we can hope. It was about a month later. Of course, it would be Patrick, who still hated Doug, was in the basement where our laundry machines were doing his laundry, and he's pulling out his stuff from the dryer, and he turns to go to the door, and Doug is standing in the doorway. I don't know if this is standing, but you know what I mean. He's standing, and he's pissed. He's lonely, he's cold, he hasn't eaten in a month, and he is fucking pissed. And he's striking at Patrick, and Patrick's freaked out. Patrick hurdles the snake, runs up, gets Jason, who you may remember is a biology major with an emphasis on zoology, so he has some experience wrangling animals. So Jason gets some oven mitts, comes down with a bag, gets Doug into the bag. We get him back in jail, put the lid on. After that, I think we taped it up. I don't know. But Doug was never the same after that. Something happened to him on the outside. And when you'd walk by the terrarium, he'd strike at the glass, which he had never done before. And so we no longer took him out to play. So he was lonelier than ever. It was tragic. And at the end of the semester, Adam came by and he said, hey, I found an apartment that's snake-friendly. Can I have Doug back? And so that was the last time I ever saw Doug. Epilogue. 2 years later, I'm at a friend's party, and I see Adam across the way, and we had lost touch in the last 2 years. Hadn't seen him all that time. We see each other, and it's oh, hey, and we run across the room, and we're laughing and hugging. And the first thing I say is you got to tell me, how's Doug? And Adam's smile drops, and his body goes limp, and he shakes his head, and he says, it didn't turn out too well for Doug. And I'm what happened? And he says, well, I know Doug was lonely, so I got him a boa constrictor friend. And you know I'm not good at naming things, so I named him Snake. So Doug and Snake, were like living together in the terrarium, and I went away for a while, and I had a friend feed him, and I forgot to tell my friend one of the most important things is if you're feeding more than one boa constrictor at the same time, you have to separate them. Because boa constrictors at the back of their jaw have a tooth that angles backwards, so it acts like a fishhook. So if they latch onto something and it starts going down the gullet, it's impossible for it to come back out. So if two boas latch onto the same rat, like one's gonna eat a lot more than it expects. And Doug had the smaller jaw. That's how he went down. Oh yeah, it was horrible. No, eaten by his best friend. His friend probably didn't even want to eat him. It was tragic. Like the regret after that dinner. And I guess the easy moral would be like, careful what you wish for. Doug wished for a friend. His friend ate him. But I think more than that, like, I learned a lot living with Doug. Like, before Doug and I were roommates, if I'd seen Doug on the street, I'd say, look at that asshole. But, like, I got to know Doug. I understood where he was coming from. And I'm like, if I can learn to empathize with a snake, surely I should try a little bit harder to empathize with my fellow humans. So next time you're in the city, if you're trying to get off the subway and the people do not step aside and allow you off first before boarding, before saying asshole, think, maybe that guy's cold. Maybe he's lonely. Maybe his roommate just tried to eat him. Thank you.
Steve Whyte, everyone.